our first panelist, we're just going to introduce one at a time, is Élisabeth Godefroy, and she'll be speaking on the Acts, a protest opportunity for direct action, a study of seasoned activists in the Parisian Yellow Vest mobilization. And we're going to proceed as we already have, being 20 minutes for a talk and then 10 minutes for discussion. So there we go. Thank you, Élisabeth.
Thank you, Kimberly, for the presentation and for the organization also. So maybe in between 2018 and 2019, you might have seen images in the newspaper, on the television, of Paris and the famous Avenue des Champs-Élysées burning and set to fire by dangerous people wearing yellow vest. So this is what my talk is about, and particularly about the yellow vest demonstration. So to introduce this talk, it's important to remind that demonstration is one of the main elements of the modern repertoire of collective action that was described by Charles Tilly. In France, it has long been considered as illegitimate because it was competing votes in the context of expanding universal suffrage. And however, since 1970s, demonstrations have gradually become a legitimate and highly routinized form of protest in France. And it's now often perceived as a way to direct address to political leaders. Some researchers like Olivier Fiel or Daniel Tartakovsky almost describe it as a form of popular initiative referendum from the street, as in the second half of the 20th century, many mass protests have succeeded in overturning government and government legislative projects. But since 2016 in France, no street mobilization, even massive one, had succeeded in forcing the withdrawal of proposed law. Traditional demonstrations, especially the ones that are organized by unions, are therefore increasingly considered as useless, ineffective in influencing the political process in a broader context of democratic crisis that also in France affect trade unions. So it's in this broader context that the yellow vests emerged. So let me remind you or explain briefly what the yellow vest movement are. So it began on the 17th of November 2018 and remained quite active till 2019. So there were a lot of debates about how many protesters went to participate in the yellow vest, but according to some researchers, around 3 million of French people took part in at least one action of the yellow vest. The mobilization first took shape on social media around the opposition to a fuel tax, but it rapidly expanded to many other revendications and mainly social claims, but also democratic claims. So the yellow vest stand out in several key ways, especially when you compare them to the previous anti-austerity protest cycle mobilization. So first, the yellow vests use a very original combination of protest practice deployed all around the country. So roundabout occupation in rural and suburban areas, road blockades, free tour operation, but also demonstration in Paris and in the main French cities. The yellow vest value internal horizontality, direct democracy, and leaderless decision. So the second thing is that their social composition is quite heterogeneous. So you have participants that are coming from working class, but also from lower middle class. And so the political composition of the yellow vest is also very mixed. So some participants vote from radical left, some others from far right, and many participants don't identify themselves in the traditional left-right cleavage. A large portion of yellow vests are also first-time protesters, but the movement also attracts a lot of very seasoned activists. So paradoxally, the Yellow Vests were claiming that they were completely autonomous from a political field, union field, but they also aggregate activists from all sides. So I will show now how the Yellow Vest and its heterogeneous components appropriate and perform the demonstration in Paris, and to understand the specific morphology of the Yellow Vest demonstration. I think it's important to take in account the lack of protest experience of many protesters, but also they aim to distinguishing themselves from traditional demonstration, especially trade union demonstration. That will be the first part, and I also think that it's important to take in account that many activists came with very different conception of democracy, representative democracy, and also experience of protest, and that also contribute to shape the morphology of this demonstration. So I will focus on Paris, and I will use data that I collected in my doctoral research that is not completely done yet, that include observation of the Parisian Act since 2018. So when I'm talking about acts, I refer to the word that the Yellow Vests use to call the weekly gathering that happened every Saturday, like in the theater play, actually. And the participants number the acts to track them in the time. So you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 for each Saturday. So I also conduct 130 semi-structured interviews with the Yellow Vests from very different backgrounds, but also seasoned activists from all sides, so from anarchists to neo-fascist activists. And I also collected lots of data online, especially on Facebook. So to begin, I'd like to go back to how, from a rather very uncertain situation regarding what form of action to adopt, the Yellow Vest came to embrace the insurrection demonstration as their main mode of protest in Paris. So the Daniel Tartakoski, which is a historian, specialist of demonstration, a reference in France on this matter, defined the insurrection demonstration as a protest that targets the state or the government, symbolically or directly, in order to force decisions that are not part of its original agenda, under pressure, but without necessarily violence. So after several months of mobilization on social media, a call was made for a day of protest on November 17, 2018. Many Yellow Vests in rural areas decide to occupy the roundabout near their home, but some digital figure of the movement also called for gather in Paris. And one of them was a man called Eric Drouet, who was a truck driver with no past previous activist experience, and who led one of the largest Yellow Vest Facebook group called La France en colère, so the angry friends with 3 points of exclamation, that gather around 300,000 members, so very big group. So he first called for a blockade in Paris on the morning, but the day's agenda was quite unclear. You had like calls on the internet to go to the Champs-Élysées, but it was uncertain, but still quite spontaneously from the early morning, Yellow Vests gathered around the Arc de Triomphe that you have here, and try in the afternoon to approach the presidential palace that is here. And at the Place de la Concorde, they were pushed back by the police force. So the media coverage of that day emphasizes the fact that it was mainly prime activists that was very surprised to be pushed back with gas. So also beyond the political significance of approaching the presidential palace, the Champs-Élysées have a very symbolic meanings. It's a symbol of Paris, but also of luxury and social inequality. I won't have time to describe all the evolution act by act, but I can say that despite the fact that the local state authority tried to forbid and try to control this specific area using violent response to protesters, the gathering, the Yellow didn't lose their determination to demonstrate there and to target the Palais de l'Élysée. So this determination is reflected in chants at the demonstrations, such as Emmanuel Macron, "Oh Hasso, we are coming for you at your house." That's what you could hear at this time in the protest, in reference to a remark made by Emmanuel Macron in July 2018. Because after during the demonstration of the 1st of May, one of his security guard hit demonstrator, and there been a video of that that created a big scandal. But Macron decided to take the defense of his security staff and said, "Let them come for me," to respond to the people that were criticizing him. So that's why the Yellow Vests are saying, "We are coming for you at your house." I think that this chant also illustrates the rapid politicization of the movement and the evolution from just a fuel tax-related movement to a broader set of claims, including social demand and the renewal of French democracy. So the Yellow Vests were facing very violent repression, so it forced them to confront the question of how organizing their demonstration. Concerning this repression, every Saturday, dozens of people were injured. By the end of December, 6 protesters had already lost an eye in the Paris demonstration. And according to experts, there is no comparable instance of repression in France since, not even Mai 68, but since the crackdown of demonstration for Algerian independence in the early 60s. So this repression, in order to avoid repression, Yellow Vests started to argue that they should notify the demonstration to the public local authority. And as this first extract of interview I made with one of the first Yellow Vest organizers in Paris, it was also a way to respond to some critique of the government and the critique from the unions that said that the Yellow Vests are not capable of organizing a proper demonstration. That's what he said. That was about dignity, but also a way, according to him, to avoid the unions to hijack the movement. So from the end of December, some demonstrations were formally notified to the authority, and organizers attempt to organize security teams, but that were actually very, very amateur, and that was also infiltrated by the far right. But this organizer faced a core problem, the legitimacy to act. And the mistrust of law enforcement among protesters was so deep that any organizer that would take the initiative to collaborate with police could seen as a traitor. So to retain this legitimacy, local organizers had to show that they were building a power struggle with the government. And that's why we find during the winter 2019 that kind of statement from the organizer saying that they won't notify the demonstration unless Emmanuel Macron excused himself for insult he made at the Yellow Vest. So, and usually those organizers also organize polls on Facebook. Do you agree or not to notify the demonstration, in order to legitimate in a bit plebiscitary way their own decision? So I think that considering this delicate matter of who is legitimate to organize a demo, it's interesting to mention what political scientist Samuel Ayat wrote about demonstration. He argues that the rule governing demonstration in France since 1848 had created a kind of homology between the street and the representative government by imposing regulation and encouraging close collaboration between police and demonstrators. So this public authority contributes to produce a leader, spokesperson, and responsible within a street demonstration. And that was precisely the rules that the Yellow Vests are trying to get rid of or to deal with. So, as I mentioned earlier, the presence of trade unions and more broadly activist groups within the movement was a source of tension. So this is what I'm going to talk now. First, about the way some activists from trade unions, but also radical left political party tries to build kind of progressive bloc within the Parisian Act. So we had the local section of the CGT, so the trade unions that Sean talked about a bit earlier, which Émile Pouget was a member back in the beginning of the 20th century. So it's still quite combative, let's say, trade union, but also sometimes considered as a traitor to the cause of the working class, let's say that. But the local responsive of these unions in Paris decide whether the direction, the national bureaucracy didn't want to go to the Yellow Vest to say, I will go, to show his opposition to the bureaucracy. And try to represent his unions inside the Yellow Vest, and also the fact that social repression must not be negotiated but must be fought, and to show a more like combative image of his trade union. I think I don't have so much time left. Comments. Okay, so I will go faster. So you also have a progressive bloc made by political parties such as the new anti-capitalist party. And they had to adapt also their strategy, to say it quickly, to the presence of the far right because they were attacked inside the cortege. And that's why they also decide to wear yellow vest in order not to be seen as some kind of outside body that was chasing by fascists that were wearing yellow vests in the demonstration, and they start to try to yes get more integrate in the landscape, let's say. So you also had maybe the most obvious, but some kind of insurrectionary convergence between Yellow Vest and autonomous and anarchist activists. And to say it very quickly, autonomous and anarchists have been very enthusiastic about the insurrectionary dimension of the movement. Meanwhile, many Yellow Vests start to believe, even primo contestataires and so on, that Black Bloc practice has their place inside the act. And last, maybe the more sensitive question, the one of the far right inside the Yellow Vest movement. The far right joined this protest very early, and it's important to keep in mind that starting the late 19th century, according to Daniel Tartakovsky, the far right helped to inscribe the insurrection demonstration into the collective repertoire of France, with protests initiated by Boulangistes, Nationalist League, and so on. Especially a special date, the 6th February 1935, which is, to sum up, a very important date in the far-right memoir, because after a big protest and riot, they managed to make the government fall. So when the far-right came to the Yellow Vest, they used the slogan of the 6th February 1935, which is "Down with the tear." So you could see many groups of monarchists, Catholic integrists, or nationalists having that kind of banner, "Abat les voleurs," So it was kind of a return to the far right origin. But at some point, after many fights with anti-fascists, they had to admit that it's the red that controlled the street. So progressively during the winter of 2019, they start quitting the movement. Okay. Okay, so I can actually stop that because this is the end of my description.
Thank you very much. And now you open the floor for questions.
First of all, thank you very much for that. That was fascinating. And you've opened up new doors for me in terms of my understanding of this movement. I'm really amazed at the actual Francais show, at least folks showing up at this day and going to previous action activities. That's really amazing. But I wanted to ask you about your approach as a researcher and how were you able to get such a broad cross section of people to engage with you, and how did you present yourself to them?
So I started working on the Yellow Vest movement in Paris when it started. Actually, at that time I was in master. And by the time, so I start knowing a lot of people, but mainly the progressive side of the movement. And then when I start my PhD, it was a question for should I interview or not, and how can I interview people also from the dark side of the Yellow Vest. And at that time, the anti-Green Pass movement starts. So you had Yellow Vest, but also all kinds of monarchists, neo-Nazis, and so on in the streets. And I went to this demonstration and spent time there and managed to interview people from here. So it's a bit complicated. You have to hide your political ID, of course, but sometimes actually they are very insistent about but what do you think? And when you spend time with people, it's actually hard sometimes to always say I won't answer, blah, 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 neutrality, and so on. So sometimes happen that I say, well, I'm more leftist kind. But still, sometimes they can be like some of them say, you're not so left because if you were so left, you couldn't speak with us. So they consider me as some kind of open-minded leftist. Well, some of them are quite also defiant. And also you have to take into account that within the people I interviewed, a lot of them want people to talk about them. So they know that they take you as a journalist. They know that you will probably write very bad things on them, but they want publicity. So they will talk to you, even say very shocking thing to you, and they know what effect it makes, and pretending that they did like a horrible thing, you know, but just I don't know, because they think that in some way it will help us to maintain their leadership inside the far-right milieu. I think this is my hypothesis. So as long as you don't publish your political ideas on Facebook or Twitter and so on, and I think it's possible to manage some interviews.
Just follow up. How did they talk about, say, the real Guardians? How did they talk about the presence of the left in the movement?
It's between they hate the left, of course, but it's between hate and admiration also. Because they are quite actually aware that they are not able to do things like bad blog. They don't have the resources. They don't have the savoir-faire and so on. So it's a bit in between. And of course, they say that the Reds, the leftists hijack the movement, that it's, and they treat it with a bit of despite sometimes. But it's in between, a bit of animation. And also, some of them like to have this socialist national revolutionary posture and pretending that I'm a bit Marxist, but in the same time, I read Charles Maurras, so they like to maintain this ambiguity. So,
one question, like it's really fascinating because these heterogeneous movements are really full of tensions. And I follow one through Twitter, and I see how presence of others, the stakeholders in that movement, demobilize other groups. So, for example, when progressives see proclaim Kremlin like flags in the protest, they start hysterical like rants on Twitter and vice versa. I'm just wondering whether that has something to do with the way kind of the movement started to collapse internally because there was no any ideological coherence.
You mean did the yellow vest collapse because it has no internal?
Yeah, that's right.
In some way, yes, but I think that having no internal coherence was also some kind of strength. Because what you see that, I mean, the presence of other groups that you don't share ideas with or that are antagonists to your ideas sometimes can make the people leave the movement, but also just do something beside. And for instance, in many cities, so you have at the beginning just one roundabout that was shared by everyone, and then they start to fight. So you have the left roundabout and then the right roundabout. And the same with the demos, actually. I didn't have time to talk about that, but at some point, so there were several separate demos with several organizers with a specific political affinity, and they were just not demonstrating together. So it's, yeah.
I just wonder, like, whether progressives were feeling that they're giving platform to right-wing populism inadvertently, like without actually knowing that they are helping let them come to power. And were they afraid of that? Like that the yellow vest will actually be a platform for the right to turn to power?
Well, actually, the progressive component wait a bit longer than the far right to get in the movement because of hesitation, because they were not so sure, and they were afraid to go to some jihadist mobilization or. But many of them consider that by the spring of 2019, they had hijacked the movement.
They felt they'd gone
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Time for one quick question.
If no one else does, thank you, that's really interesting. So you've up there cited this invocation of aspects of French political history from the right. I guess I'm interested in the broader question about how other components of the movement also sometimes calls upon elements of history and memory from previous direct action protests. To what extent was that an important part of all of the components of the movement or not? And to what extent did the movement, the members of the movement, think that they were doing something new that was breaking with or extending or opening up new possibilities for direct action? To what extent did they think that it was just a continuation of past traditions and repertoires?
Other historical reference to direct action, like I think that no one in my interview talked to me about direct action. Like using really the word and having some very articulating thought about that. So this conference makes me think of that, but it doesn't mean that people, because one of the main and more common reference in the yellow vest was French Revolution. So it's something else, it's more revolution. But I mean, if you make an interview with an anarchist, you will maybe show up with some reference, anarchist reference, with an autonomous to some autonomy reference. So it's, but I think that it's the far right that shared the most obvious direct action reference into the movement. But yeah. And yet the yellow vests were thinking they were super new, but also I think also because most of them are chrono demonstrators, so
First time.
first timer, yes. Sorry, it's a direct literal translation from French. Sorry for my French, but it's not from my English. But also because they don't have a very deep knowledge about what comes before them most of the time, except civil life. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth.